All
I'm
right,
trying to-
everyone. So welcome to the ProDA, Progressive Caucus of Democrats Abroad, DNC candidate interviews. We use the word interview, but actually this is expected to be more of a kind of informal opportunity for us to foster discussion around important issues to the Progressive Caucus of Democrats Abroad and our members, and just Democrats abroad as a whole. We want to give everyone an opportunity to speak as much as possible. So please be aware that we will keep time for any comments or answers to our questions, and we will ask you to cut you short after either 90 seconds or 2 minutes, and we will judge that based on how many candidates we have speaking. If we have quite a few candidates today, so we don't expect that everyone will answer every question. If that disappoints you, I'm sorry, but but we may keep questions to a certain number of people, either 3 or 6, depending on the total number of candidates speaking. So we'll be ascertaining how many candidates are on the call as we start right now. Before we get started, I should ask, if there are any questions as to the format? I'd also like to mention that our Sue Alexness and myself, the co-chairs of Democrats Abroad, will be co-hosting today's meeting. We will ask questions before we start the open question portion of today. Co-hosts may ask a follow-up question to answer. So please be ready for that. We'll give 40 seconds or some reasonable time for that follow-up answer. At the same time, when we have open opportunity for listeners to ask questions as well, the electors, we ask that electors will be allowed to ask questions, and only one question, unless there's no one in the queue. And then we ask that non-electors please remain as a spectator So in summary, please keep your responses to 90 seconds and we'll cut you off at 2 minutes. We will say thank you and move on to give another candidate an opportunity. We'll also be using the queue, so please make sure to put yourself in the queue so that we're able to know that you're going to be the one to speak next. All right, Sue?
Sorry, which queue?
Sorry, in the chat box.
So, Gordon, were you saying that people should like indicate in the chat box that they want to speak?
Yes.
So like star hand up, I guess the usual DA thing. And I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do now, Gordon. Am I supposed to get them, the candidates started on the first thing?
Yeah, I would like to get started on the first question, and sorry, so I realize that not everybody is 100% knows about our star hand up. So if you want to get into the queue, just type star hand up and in the chat box to everyone, and we will call on you in the order that you are in that chat box.
I'll just jump in to say that maybe somebody doesn't know how to find the chat box. I know we've all been sort of living on Zoom, but you go take your cursor to the bottom of the screen and a bunch of icons will pop up, and pretty much in the middle you'll see something that looks like a speech bubble from a comic book. If you click on that, then it opens a little box that then has what is called the chat, and that's where people can put star hand up. That's the kind of the standard that DA has developed. I'll put a sample in there that then we know that someone has something they want to say. The hand up feature doesn't allow us to keep track of the order in which people put their hands up. So that's why DA uses this, which is really great. All right, so we starting with opening statements from the candidates?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, so our initial thought had been to go alphabetically, but I'm seeing you all in, maybe the participants list allows us a way to, okay, yes, the participants list is actually in alphabetical order by first name. So if the candidates don't mind, we'll just use that so that we can go through opening statements, and looking to see how many candidates we have. I think we're gonna have to maybe go with 1 minute statements. Is that right, Gordon? Was it 1 minute or one and a half? 1 minute? Okay.
It was 1 minute if we had
okay.
over 10.
So I'm sorry, Frederick Bailey, are you a candidate? I don't see by your.
Yes, I am.
Oh, wonderful. So if you're prepared, you, for some reason, your name is coming up before the A's. you have a special power of some kind. So so you're first in our list. So I'm going to ask you to. I think we said you have 1 minute. Is that the amount of time?
That's right.
Okay, so you have 1 minute, Frederick, and we're watching the time, and we will try to really stick to cutting people off as politely as we can.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Frederick. Whenever you're ready.
Yes, I'm Frederick Bailey, Sr. I am a permanent resident of Coronado, Panama. I'm a retired CEO from a private detective agency that I incorporated in Pennsylvania in 1991 as Pinpoint Protective Services, that originally specialized in the location and recovery of missing children in the United States. I was a consultant to and performed environmental investigations for the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection for 9 years. In 2010, I developed a nonprofit called, what was it, Pinpoint Health and Community Service, in order to compete in a request for proposal from the Department of Health and Human Services, if I recall. Seeking applicants to compete in the proposal for the training and enrolling persons in the Affordable Care Act. Affordable Care Act health insurance plan, I should add, Obamacare.
Okay, please wrap up in 20 seconds, Fred.
We were successful. If I'm elected as a delegate, I would like to first of all do a proposal to ensure the EPA has a legal mandate to protect and enforce the laws that are protected by the natural resources entrusted to all states within the United States. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay, thank you, Fred. So next in our list, we have Art Shankler, and Art's unmuted and ready to go.
Hi, Sue. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Well, I was brought up, okay. I was brought up to be modest, so I won't say too much about myself other than I've been with Democrats Abroad for a while. Some of you know me because I'm always asking for money. I do that because I believe in the mission of Democrats Abroad. And on that point, I am not modest. I am proud to be a member of Democrats Abroad, and I would be proud to represent the organization, our members, the Progressive Caucus, all of the caucuses to the greater Democratic Party community and to voters at large, because I believe in our mission to get out the vote, to represent Democrats overseas, and to push for reform, whether it's at the DNC or in the larger Democratic Party. And I see all those things as going together. I don't see them as separate paths. All of them are focused on making the party more attractive to people around the world. And that fits in with our Get Out the Vote mission and supporting policies that will make the world a better place. I would only make one more point at the beginning. You know, I see a lot of fine people on the screen here. This is not the important election of 2020. That important election comes in November. And I am committed, I'll say it right now,
Please
win
wrap
or
up in
lose.
20 seconds.
Sure. I am committed, win or lose, to helping us win, and whether I win or lose, to helping us win in November. But I do want to make the point that winning without meaning, or victory without meaning, is by definition a meaningless victory. So we have to also fight for policies that will make the world and America a better place for all of us to live in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art. That was perfect timing. So I'm going to just take a break before our next speaker. According to the naming convention we have, Joe Smallhoover is the next candidate in the alphabetical order. So if anyone's joined us since our opening remarks, we asked people to rename themselves in using their panel, their little picture on the gallery to indicate whether they're an elector or a candidate or an observer. And and that's what I'm using to go through the list of candidates and ask them alphabetically to make their opening statements of 1.5 minutes. So, if your name starts with a letter earlier than J and you're a candidate, I guess you can let us know in the chat. But for now, I'm going to ask Joe Smallhoover to, well, I'll unmute you, Joe, and ask you to go ahead and do your opening statement. Thanks.
Thanks, Sue. And thank all of you for being here. This is actually a great opportunity. I agree with Art that this is not the key election of 2020. That one comes on the 3rd of November. And we have one job. We have many tasks, but we have one job. And I would like to be one of the many hands that take that job to Washington as your DNC member. I grew up in a union household. My mother was a union negotiator. My grandfather, with whom we lived, was the head of his local. I started paying union dues when I was 17. I attended the first Earth Day and have been a committed environmentalist ever since then. I've been following liberal causes for all of my life. If you remember the old television show Laverne and Shirley, Laverne wore a sweater with a big L, and we used to say, use the word liberal more than progressive. I think we should all carry that big L or a big P on our heart as broadly and as passionately as they possibly can. And I'll answer questions later on, but that's who I am. I am passionately a big L or a big P and have been all my life. Thank you.
Thank you. Great on time.
Okay, thank you,
Alright.
Joe. So going through the list here, see lots of electors, that's great. We have a candidate, Martha McDevitt Pugh. I've unmuted you, Martha.
Oh, thanks. I did it at the same time. Thanks so much, Sue. Yeah, and thanks proDA for organizing this forum. It's always really great to get together, and especially at the time of election. So, so I'm a California voter living in the Netherlands. I moved to the Netherlands for 2 reasons. One, and the Defense of Marriage Act, which meant that I could not bring my partner, now my wife, into the United States. And that's how I found DA. I started an initiative to work to change the legislation around immigration and same-sex couples, and DA became a really natural home to me and took that up. So I'm really passionate about Democrats abroad finding those gaps, those places where we're not represented, we're not heard, where we have issues, and making sure that we're taken into account and we're on the agenda. I am currently one of your DNC members, and that is what I've been doing, is to make sure that DA is visible, represented, seen, and that we find all those opportunities to make sure that we are known at the DNC and that we can connect up with all the initiatives there. And I have to say, I think that DA is known at the DNC, but we always get forgotten because we're not present in the United States. So really one of the main jobs of the DNC members is to make sure that we're on the agenda, that our needs are expressed, that we make the connections that we need to make with all of the groups in the United States and in Washington to do the things that are really important for Americans abroad. So as a DNC member, my focus really is on making sure that we're represented, that we're visible, that we get the support that we need, and that we find the policy issues where we can make the biggest difference. I think our stories are really powerful. I think we live in different realities than Americans that are in the United States. And I think that that is a huge contribution to the future that all of us want to see. So as a DNC member, my commitment is to make sure that all of us and our stories and our needs and our policy
Wrap
issues
up in 15.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martha.
Thanks, Martha. So next up we have Orlando Vidal. I'll unmute you, Orlando. Well, maybe you're unmuting yourself. Seems I'm unable to unmute. Oh, there we go. Okay.
I just unmuted myself. Thank you, proDA, for this. This is great. For those who may not know, before serving as one of your DNC members, I served in a prior ExCom for 2 terms as DA's International Counsel. In my professional life, I'm a partner at an international law firm where I work out of our Dubai office, leading our compliance and internal investigations practice. And in a previous life, I was a federal prosecutor. Why should you vote for me? Contrary to what one of the other contenders for the seat has apparently said, I'm a real team player. Just ask the rest of the ExCom members that I got to serve with for 4 years. But if I have to stand alone to defend the interests of Democrats abroad, I'm not afraid to do so. In fact, I've done so. If necessary, I fight for DA. There's strength in diversity, and by that I don't mean the fact that I'm the only one Hispanic member of the DNC, which I think it's important. What I mean is diversity of opinion. We don't need, and we should not want a delegation that necessarily agrees on everything. What we do is what we do need is a delegation that will work well together. And I know I will work well with Ken, Katie, and Aaron, who have already been regionally elected. So I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Orlando. So next on the list, I think Peter Foley is a candidate. So we're going to ask Peter. I'll unmute you, Peter. Or maybe we're... Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me?
We hear you now. Yeah, sorry, we were playing mute and unmute tag.
Oh.
Like.
It's great that you guys organized this. This is a pleasure to be on. My name is Peter Foley, and I worked as a lot of different things. Executive director of an international center in New York. I was the Peace Corps country director in China, Peace Corps volunteer in Thailand and Ecuador. I worked for Planned Parenthood Federation of America for over 11 years as the regional director. We had an international division at that time called FPIA. So I was very much involved in the AIDS work, the 80s and 90s. And the reason I'm running is mainly to deliver a message with the help of Abraham Lincoln, who said in, I think it was 1862, I quote, the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise to the occasion as our case is new. So we must think anew and act anew.
15 seconds.
Oh gosh, wait. Okay. Basically, that's the message that I have, is that we need to think like Bernie and like AOC, who have given us a very good blueprint of where we need to go. And we need to treat each other as brothers and sisters completely across the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So I believe we have one more candidate. If there's another candidate, then that's Sarah Law. You can get ready to unmute. And if there's another candidate that
If
we've missed,
anyone, please, let us know right now.
you can just, if you can use the chat, or you need to speak right away, because we don't want to cut off Sarah Law when she gets started. Do you want me to unmute you, Sarah Law? Are you going to unmute?
I think I just did. Can you hear me?
We hear you perfectly.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much for organizing this. My name is Sarah Law. I've been involved with DA India ever since 2015, where I served as legal counsel and treasurer. So I'm a Democrat from my mom, right? My mom, from having no education and not being able to speak English, she immigrated to the US, cleaned motel rooms, and eventually rose up and bought the very same motel that she cleaned hotel rooms in. Before this, I served as Director for Election Protection in the state of Minnesota, and I worked on numerous local campaigns in Minnesota. And presently, I run an NGO full-time in India. So I know that for many of us, our mission is about unity and unifying ourselves to ensure that we beat Donald Trump. But unity does not mean suppressing progressive voices and shoving them into a corner. Unity means that we ensure that we all take up space and everyone's voice is heard and represented and get all of our issues to the forefront. I'm committed to doing everything I can to represent you guys if given the opportunity. I hope to bring up issues, not just in 2020, but well beyond 2020. Things that people don't necessarily talk about, such as how COVID is impacting all of us, how unfair taxation issues like FATCA are, how voter insecurity is a real issue, especially for Americans living abroad, what our LGBTQ and immigrant and veteran voices go through and how important these voices are, and what environmental justice means to us. I hope that we can make things more inclusive, and I hope to help bring our voices to the forefront. I'd love to talk to you more about this and hopefully answer more questions. It would be an absolute honor if you guys could give me a chance to answer more of these questions and engage with you all on these issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. So I think, so that's it for candidates that are on the call. And if more join us later, maybe there'll be more answers. So we're going to start. We have one question from proDA that we'd like to ask the candidates to respond to. And I guess we shouldn't keep the same order. So maybe we'll go in reverse alphabetical order for the next one. And by first name. And Gordon's going to ask that question.
Okay, and before I ask that question, I want to ask our electors on the call. So we did say we want this to be kind of an informal discussion. So while our candidates are answering this next question, we want to ask our electors to think of a question that you have for the candidates. And then we will open up the floor so we can take those elector questions and ask candidates to answer them. As I explained at the beginning, not every candidate may be able to answer your question. We may leave it to maybe half to answer one question and move to the next question so we can make sure that we keep the conversation going. And so I don't get bored. So to move us forward, I'd like to know from our candidates, what would be your top priorities as a DNC member, and what actions would you take to achieve them? I will give each of you 90 seconds to answer that question. And then please note that I will move on to the next candidate to answer your question.
Could one of our team put the question in the chat box so that candidates can and participants can see it written there? Okay. Did I do a good job going through the candidates? Should I do it again? Okay, so Sarah Law, you are first in our reverse alphabetical list, which is really the way it should be, being someone with an S last name myself. So, so thank you, Sarah Law, whenever you're ready. Did we give a time limit, Gordon? I don't remember.
Yes, so 90 seconds.
A minute and a half.
I know it's short, but I want to give everyone an opportunity.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
All right. So thank you for that fantastic question. As spoken about briefly in my introduction, I think that it's really important that when we say that we want to unite each other, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're excluding certain voices. I think that unity means that we have diversity in voices, that we bring up issues that don't necessarily have a platform or a chance to be heard. So my number one priority is effectively going to be transparency, right? And unity. I promise to prioritize transparency as your representative. That means that I'm accountable to you. I will work to communicate with you through different ways to always ensure that your voices are being represented at the DNC. This includes regularly updating myself with the work of all of our country committees, working with you to find ways to also involve your country members to give input on issues that impact them and matter to all of us, collaborating with you on ideas, and regularly updating you guys through newsletters, social media, emails, reports, and different outreach programs that'll hopefully strengthen the connections between our country committees and the DNC. I promise to use every avenue possible to represent you at every single meeting and beyond and represent your issues. This means that when I'm talking about unity, I mean that every single issue matters and that we need to take up space and create space for the issues that don't necessarily get a lot of traction. I promise that in addition to establishing ways to work with different country committees and expanding transparency, I will work closely with Democrats Abroad global leadership and my other co-DNC representatives, along with DNC candidates who decided to run but didn't necessarily make it, because I think we all have extremely unique ideas and ways of going about increasing transparency to further our goals and represent our voices. I am your representative, and I hope to make it very, very clear that if elected, that's what I'm going to do, is represent you guys.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay, so next in the order is Orlando Vidal.
So I would group them into 3 areas. One is what we always try to do, and it's a bit, I've called it a bit like the Sisyphus myth in Greek mythology of pushing this boulder up the hill only to see it roll down every night. We constantly have to educate the DNC about who we are and what we can do for all the other state parties. And part of that means equal funding for Democrats abroad, just like with the other states. We are not treated like every state. We are treated like the poor cousin of the Democratic Party, and we need to fix that. The second thing, I think we need to push reforms at the DNC. For one, I am appalled, and this is a heavy lift, that the chair of the DNC gets to appoint 75 people just because he's the chair of the DNC. And I know that a lot of those appointments are people that don't really, well, let me just say that are of certain means that are able to get themselves a seat at the DNC, and that's pretty outrageous. And the third thing I would say is that we need to represent the interests of our members, the DNC. And our members, by and large, and you know this better than anyone, are progressive. And we need to represent those interests at the DNC, be they on the environmental front. I voted for us to have a dedicated debate on climate change, and the other interests that affect Democrats abroad. So those are the 3 buckets of issues that I would focus on.
Thank you, Orlando.
So next up is Martha. I'm just going to let people unmute themselves. That seems to be quickest and easiest. So
Great.
ahead,
Thanks, Sue. I found the unmute button. So yeah, just following up on what Orlando said about the boulder, I think that that's really core to what there is to do with the DNC, is to make sure that so what I would do is I would bring DA to the DNC. And if you look at how the DNC is organized, it's organized obviously geographically around 50 states. So there's like 50 relationships there to build to make sure that those states know how we can get out their vote. But the DNC is also organized around constituencies and caucuses. So what I would do is make sure that DA is known throughout the DNC, throughout the diverse caucuses and constituencies that we're part of, and that we are able to fulfill our mission, right? Which is getting out the vote, that we build the relationships that we need to do that. But I also think that when a new administration comes in January next year, we need to be really ready with our policy issues. So for example, things like immigration, transmission of citizenship, tax issues, are all critical things that we bring a unique perspective to. And there's, of course, many more issues, but I think it's one of my top priorities would be to make sure that we're positioned to really act around policy issues and legislation that matters to us and to our members. So listen to the members, find out what's important. I mean, proDA is a terrific platform for really listening and finding out what's important, and bring that to the DNC. And the other side of that, of course, is bringing the DNC back to DA and making sure that you all have an idea of what's happening there and an opportunity to contribute.
Wonderful,
Martha.
thank you. So I made a mistake in the alphabetical order and I missed Peter. It was partly because his mic was unmuted, which took him out of the alphabetical order, which we all learned from Bob Valier today in the chat. So I'm gonna ask Peter to go next. And I'm just making sure, do you know how to unmute yourself, Peter? Would you like me to do it? I'll do it for you. You're unmuted, Peter.
Okay, great. Thank you for unmuting me.
Sure.
As I said before, I'm a Bernie Sanders advocate and his platform in AOC. They're the two people that I think have laid out exactly what we need to do in terms of the policy platform of DNC. So that's what I'd be working for on behalf of Dems Abroad. Dems Abroad, by the way, I think is very heavy for Bernie Sanders and his platform. So I hope I find a willing audience for that. We're talking about climate change. And as I said, Abraham Lincoln said we have to think anew, act anew. And if we're going to act anew, we really need to be completely radical in terms of this. Climate change has got to be done right away and urgently. And I think everybody understands that, or at least the Democrats do. In terms of immigration reform, it has to be total. I mean, we're treating immigrants terribly. I've heard some stories from friends of mine in New York that immigrants died unnecessarily. They went to the that is illegal immigrants. Went to the hospital and were rejected, and terrible stories. I worked for many years for Planned Parenthood, so I'm a big advocate of choice. Abortion rights for women. I think we need to have another war on poverty, and I'm hoping the Democratic platform will include that. We lost, President Johnson tried it, and unfortunately the Vietnam War interceded. Civil rights, we know what's going on right now. I mean, it's just not happening. It's got to happen. And I would like to open up communication, lines of communication, which I think DNC has not had too good a job doing in terms of our local rank and file clubs. We don't get any information from the DNC. I hadn't for any time then when I was serving in various posts in the DNC.
Okay. Oops. I don't know what happened there. Thank you, Peter. Okay. So continuing with the same question. Oh, yeah, we'll do that. So continuing with the same question, Martha.
Just so everyone knows, our question is, what are your top priorities as a DNC member, and what actions would you take to achieve them? Martha? I'm sorry.
I just went before Peter.
Yeah, Martha just went.
It was so good.
It's Joe. It's Joe that
I was listening, Martha. I was listening.
And it's Joe. Thank you. This is good. We need a little levity here. So Joe, you are next in the alphabet. In the confused alphabetical order, we now land on Joe. When you're ready.
If I can find the unmute, there you are. This is very confusing. I don't remember learning how to alphabetize this way in school, but okay. So top priorities, I think there are two buckets. In fact, one is policy issues, and the other is DNC and Democrats abroad issues. Let's start with that one first. In the DNC side, I think I'm going to use the word team building, but I'm not going to use it in the same way that you think of it all the time. There's several elements. One is transparency. We have to, and that includes communication both ways. But what we as DNC members are doing, what DA is doing that can be taken up to the DNC and to people in the hopefully Democratic administration, and information back down as well. Transparency as to what we're doing. It's, communication. It also involves, think of a team. Football team, a basketball team, they all have different players, they all do different things, but if they don't work together, they are diverse in their tasks, but they are unified in their goals, and we have to do that, and I will work very hard to make sure that we bring all of our disparate and diverse talents together to make sure that the DNC team is as strong as it possibly can be, working together, pulling in the same direction. On the policy issues, I think the one that for me is the most urgent, or at least the most troubling, is everything that has to do with voting reform. We need constitutional amendment that ensures the right of every American citizen to vote. Jamie Raskin has such a proposal already in Congress. We need to desperately deal with the problem of gerrymandering, so that whether, and not simply at the congressional level, but at the state house levels as well. If you saw what happened in Pennsylvania just the other day, where the state, the Speaker of the House refused to tell the Democrats that there was an affected Republican member of the Speaker because of the way that the state has been totally gerrymandered and run by the Republicans. We need that kind of reform absolutely desperately. We need to have re-strengthen the Voting Rights Act so that there's no one who's being left out unfairly. And
Thank you very much, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Joe. Man. Oh, Frederick Bailey. I'm going to unmute you, Frederick. But I can't. Somehow it's slow. Sometimes I hit it and nothing happens. Are you unmuting, Frederick? Because I can't seem to get it to work. Okay, wonderful. You did it.
Yes, and I think all of those, everything I've heard has been a valid issue and definitely deserves our attention. But I think on immigration, we're missing an important point. And from a person who's done federal law enforcement, I know that the biggest immigration problem is the fact that the United States of America is the biggest consumer of drugs in Latin America. The cartels are fighting over US dollars and killing each other, abducting dissidents, but it's all about fighting over the US consumers' drug problem. We have to recognize that Latinos aren't leaving Mexico because they necessarily want to come to the US to work. They're ducking in the violence and the gangs and the fight over the American dollar. Now, I don't know how we can get anyone in either party to own up to the fact that, because it's a really difficult issue, we'd have to have a rehab program similar to, with clinics similar to, it was set up in the Affordable Care Act to do rehab and accept persons in rehab without them having to identify themselves. Nobody's going to show up if they have to identify themselves. But we need to cut down on the Americans' dependency on drugs, that they depend on, they dug some of those tunnels that you read about from San Diego.
Thank you, Frederick.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. So next in our of our candidates, we have Art Shankler. Yes, it's you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue. I would only note that we are the opposites. We are the reverse when it comes to alphabetization. I have an A for a first name and a S for a last name. So I hope there's no, funny business there with your priorities. Okay.
I'll try to be aware of my
Thank you.
bias.
Anyway, in terms of priority, as I said earlier, the most important election is not this one, it's the one in November. And we have to do everything we can to help win the presidency back, to win the Senate back, to increase our margin in the House, to win at state house levels. How can we do that? And what's our role in the DNC? Well, I agree with Orlando. It's helpful to get money. Money does make a difference. Otherwise, I wouldn't be asking you for it all the time. I do know it makes a difference, but we can also achieve other benefits. We can get surrogates. The party can help us get surrogates, not only for fundraising, but also for get out the vote activities. I don't know how many of you have been on the webinars recently that we've had with various people. Robert Reich yesterday, David Shore, Tim Kaine. I think these will help get the message out, but they've also helped us raise money. As I'm sure some of you may know, if every member gave us $5, we would have our funding problems more or less solved. So we need to help get help in reaching out to raise money from within our members, but also to help get out the vote. I was having a conversation with somebody in Mexico, and we both arrived at the name Selma Hayek as a great surrogate to help us get out the vote. So maybe, you know, if we work with the party and work with the Biden campaign, or sorry, the campaign of whoever is our nominee, you know, they can help us do a lot, even if it isn't a direct transfer of money. But we should, of course, push for money as well. And as I said earlier, you know, victory without meaning is meaningless. And we have to push for the things that make us Democrats. We have to push for equality. We have to push for diversity. We have to push for justice, particularly in light of what's now going on in America, which is a tragedy. We have to push for a healthier and safer environment, you know, which means both healthcare and the environment.
Thank you, Art.
Sorry?
Okay, thank you. That's
Thank you.
time,
Okay,
Art.
thank you. That's fine. Good. I said
So
my piece.
we're gonna switch to taking questions from the floor, and we're gonna ask the candidates to, if you want to respond to a question, you can put star, wait, how'd it go? Star,
Hand up candidate.
star, hand up candidate, or star, whatever you want, star, answer, I don't know, something so that we can see that you're lined up to answer the question. And we're gonna limit answers, not because the elector questions are less important, because we're watching the time. We're thinking we better go with 60 seconds per answer. So Gordon will keep watching the time and helping you wrap up within 60 seconds. So what we have in the queue. Yeah.
Lynn, just to add the warning that we may, you might be waiting to answer a question. We may shift to a different question before we get to you, depending on how many hands are up. So just please be aware of that.
Okay, so if you really want to answer the question, get in that chat fast if it's your hot answer. Okay, so our queue for questions, we had David M and Kyoko and Kent. So we'll start with David M.
Start with David. David, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. So my question is about structural changes in the Democratic Party and the DNC. We can talk about reforms. You know, Orlando mentioned that the chair gets to appoint 75 of the members of the DNC, and that the very powerful, he didn't say this, but the very powerful standing committees are largely made up of those appointed members chosen by the chair, not elected members from the states. And beside all the policies that we probably largely agree on, and the function of DNC members from Democrats Abroad representing Democrats abroad to the DNC, I'm very concerned about what we all can do, all Democrats everywhere, to get the party itself to function in a more democratic, transparent, and accountable way, with less concentrated among people who really have not been accountable. So I'd love to hear from each of the or whoever wants to answer, what do you think are important reforms during the 4 years when you are hoping to serve, and how would you help bring them about? And thank you in advance for your answers to that question.
Okay, so we have Joe stepping up to answer this question. 60 seconds, Joe, and Gordon will watch the clock to help you out.
Okay, David, that's an excellent question. In fact, the chair doesn't appoint those maximum 75. They are nominated by him and then elected by the DNC. But what I think, first of all, they represent a broader group of people because the states are dominant in the DNC somewhat. But I think those people should be elected by the National Convention and not by, to the extent that, and they should be fewer in number. They used to be a maximum of 100, then it went down to 75. I would limit it further. I also think that something that's absolutely essential is that that we look to increasing the size of the Democratic National Committee and increasing the size of the National Convention. This last National Convention is 2/3 of what it was in 2016. That limits the diversity and limits the people who can participate actively in the process. We should also expand the DNC to another couple hundred members. We are, the Republican Party National Committee is 105 members or 106 members. We should be 400 or 500 members to make sure that we have as many additional people, as many voices in there, and so that the activists outside Washington have a much larger voice than we would currently. That's a reform I think is necessary. Okay, thanks.
So I think Peter Foley is in the queue. I'm just finding Peter to, oh.
Peter, can you unmute?
Oh,
Peter's
unmuted. Yay. Peter, would you like to address this question? And then Sarah Law is next in the queue.
Thanks, I would. Thank you very much. I remember Donna Brazila. Some of you may remember was the chairman of DNC. And I remember a terrible thing that wounded a lot of us who were working for Bernie. And there was skullduggery during that time. And I wanted to make sure, I would try to make sure that there was a strong oversight committee and ethics committee so that they can watchdog and make sure that this never happens again. That would be my goal.
Great, thank you. So Sarah Law, you're next to answer. You can unmute when you're ready.
Just as a note, we'll be moving to the next question after Sarah Law.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I'm having trouble with my mic. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, okay, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, thank you for that great question. I think that in addition to what Joe said about the importance of advocating to expand the size of the DNC, I think that in order to get structural reforms, and this is why transparency was one of my key issues, in order to prioritize structural reforms that also benefits Democrats abroad, I think that one of the biggest things that we need is, A, we need to find ways to work with DNC committees, the DNC members, as well as state parties. And B, we need to bring in more diversity. So when I say find ways to work with DNC members and DNC committees, what do I mean by that? Many of you who have lobbied on the Hill or have reached out to representatives and Congress people or even DNC members about the issues that we go through, many times you'll see that they often are surprised when they hear that a lot of their constituents' issues are very similar to what our constituents go through, such as voter protection and the need for stronger voter protection measures to be taken. I think that an important way of achieving this would be to create different programs to get our members involved and get our members to directly be a part of improving diversity from our front. I think that's going to be a very important step in creating structural change. I think that while 2020 is an extremely important election, I think that the work is going to go far beyond that. And I think that we need to find ways to get our members to be engaged throughout, not just in 2020, but beyond that, so we can actually bring our issues to the forefront and actually bring in representation to start getting that structural change and bring in more diversity, not just through the DNC, but in Democrats abroad. So we ensure that it's not some old boys club. Thank you.
Thank you. So Orlando had also indicated his interest to answer this question. So I think that's it for candidates. So Orlando, are you ready?
Yes, Sue, hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
Yeah, this is going to sound extreme and conspiratorial, but I do think a little bit that there is a deep state kind of situation at the DNC. You can have us from each state party represent or give the state parties some level of representation. But there are some permanent structures at the DNC that are very hard to reform. We mentioned already the fact that the chair gets to appoint 75 members, and although they do get voted by the membership, they are voted in block, and I don't think a single one was rejected last time. And I know some of them, and they're just purely lobbyists with big wallets and big purses. And that's the reason why they got their seat at the DNC. Another power structure there at the DNC is the staff. Despite changes in administration after administration, many of the same people are there. And many of those people have frustrated many of our initiatives at the DNC. And as a lawyer, I'm also very interested and curious really to learn how it is that Perkins Coie, that law firm, has been able to maintain the largest contract for the Democratic Party year after year after year. I mean, this is just to mention some of the what seem to be insurmountable power structures at the DNC that really need to be looked at, really need to be put under the microscope.
Thank you, Orlando.
So I think we had announced, I believe we announced, so everyone understood, I hope, that we were going to end the responses on this question after Orlando. Art did indicate his interest to answer, but I'm hoping that people observing felt that it was clear that we had closed the
It's okay, Sue.
responses.
I thought you had said Sarala was the last person, and then you added Orlando. That's why. It's fine. It's fine.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. So we have questions from the electors, and we want to get to those. So we're going to ask electors to express their questions as quickly, succinctly as possible. And Kyoko is first in the queue for questions from the electors.
All right. You know, I know some of you better than others. Some of you I perhaps don't know quite so well. But I think we're a very diverse group. And DA is a very diverse group. And I was wondering how you think that your personal experience with being an outsider, having to take a folding chair to really get a seat at the table, so to speak, prepares you to represent DA as kind of an outsider in our party that maybe isn't given the level of respect or space that maybe we deserve.
Sarah Law, you can go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for that question, Kyoko. I mean, absolutely no offense to the lovely white elder gentleman that we have here today, but as a young woman and a woman of color who has fought my way not only to get a seat on the table, but to also help other people, other women, other minorities, especially other marginalized people who I believe everyone's voice should be heard. To get people to have a seat at the table has been a life goal of mine. It's why I have spent my time working on campaigns and working to particularly elect women and people of color in Minnesota. And after that, it's why I today run a full-time NGO in India where I work to achieve change in India by promoting gender equality and civil rights here in India. I think that these experiences of being an immigrant, of being a young woman of color, only help me understand the importance of diversity and the importance of pushing our voices to the forefront. I think that it's that diversity that is going to makes me someone who values the voices of everyone. I believe that everyone has something valuable to offer, and I think that that's a very, very important thing to have as someone who's representing everyone here. I know that we all have stories. All right, thank you.
Okay, so in our queue, Martha was next to respond to this question. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so thanks, Kyoko, for pointing out that we really are the sort of the weird party, right? Democrats Abroad as a state party is really different than all the geographically based parties. And that is a strength for us, but it also has its challenges and its pitfall. And I think we should never try to be like any of the other parties, but we always have to get in there and just find the gap. And, you know, that's why I came to Democrats Abroad. Democrats Abroad is the party that represents the people that wouldn't be represented otherwise. Really the opportunity to find those extra votes out there. And that's what my whole experience with Democrats Abroad has been, is to really course, there's so many issues we could work on. We can work on all the same issues that the parties work on, but really what we need to be doing is bringing those unique stories and bringing our voices and bringing those to the DNC so that we can really make the difference that we really can make, because we live in such a different world. We live in a world that so many Americans are longing to live in a lot of our countries. And I think that, you know, my experience bringing that from Democrats Abroad for like almost 20 years, has been a powerful experience, and it's what I would continue to do.
Thank you, Martha. So next for this is Art. Hey, Art.
Yeah, Kyoko, we did meet in Japan. I hope you remember. Great meeting. And I'm not entirely sure what you mean by an outsider. I've been a Democrat all my life, and I like to think of myself as a bit of an insider, and I apologize. I am a old white, whatever you said, we are old white boy, you know. I can't change that, unfortunately. I'd like to be a lot younger, but I'm not. But in terms of being an outsider, I think Martha and Orlando could all testify. The state parties, in particular, I think are all fascinated by Democrats abroad. I think they, and the more that we can bring the message that we're bringing votes to their elections, the more they will respect us. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. In this, and we have to do our job of getting out the vote and helping elect people in the states and elect at the presidential level. And I think with that, we will, if we manage that, and if we manage more of it every year, we will become less of an outsider and more of an insider as people begin to appreciate what it is we do and how we can help. So, and they also appreciate the viewpoint that you mentioned on issues. The fact that many of us do enjoy universal health care is a perspective that I think people in the party enjoy hearing about and appreciate the messages that we give to them on these issues that we're, well versed on and can provide added value. So I think that's the way we become, we get a better chair at the table.
Okay, so moving along, Joe is next.
Thanks, Sue. How do you bring your folding chair? Well, we just bring it and put it at the table and sit down. We have a strength. In fact, we are so different from all the other state parties. As Art said, they're kind of fascinated by us. When I was testifying in support of the delegate selection plan, a question came about our way of doing things, and they said that was really different. I said, Democrats Abroad never does the things the way other state parties do. We can be very effective if we enforce our differences and simply sit down at the table and say, look, we're here, we represent you all over the world. We have views and information. We're young, we're old, we're multiracial. We have all these things that you may not have in Iowa. We can bring to you something that you can't, and that's how you get the voice at that table. In this particular instance, we have a strength, and that is our diversity. We have our strength and that is the fact that we are also spread out across the entire world, and we can bring all kinds of extraordinary things to the DNC, to the Democratic Party, and the nation when we work as a team.
Okay, Orlando, you're next, and I'm gonna close the queue for candidates to respond to this question at this point, and we will be trying to ensure more candidate voices in the future. Anyway, so Orlando, you are next.
Thank you, Sue. Diversity, of course, is our strength. I was able to participate 3 or 4 nights ago in a conference call of the Hispanic caucus at the DNC. And it was organized by the chair of the Hispanic caucus, but really also by the chair of the DNC, Tom Perez, who also happens to be Hispanic. It was very nice to be at that call, and for the chairman of the DNC twice, once in the beginning of the call and once towards the end of the call, to acknowledge Democrats Abroad and acknowledge me, my presence by name in the call. First he said, we have on this call people from across the country, and I see my friend Orlando in Dubai. For Democrats Abroad, we have people from around the world. It's very nice to have a seat at the table and to say, we are there for American expats. I am happy to tell you that last night I got the endorsement of the chair of the Hispanic caucus for the DNC, and I'll be distributing her very kind and generous letter to the Google group. I think we all bring our own perspective, but as the son of Cuban refugees who escaped Castro's Cuba, and on my father's side, and illegal immigrants from Mexico on my mother's side, I do definitely have that unique voice. That unique voice is in Spanish, my first language, and I can contribute in that way as your representative at the DNC, especially at the Hispanic caucus.
Thank you, Orlando.
Okay, Peter, I've unmuted you, and you are the last candidate to answer this question.
Okay, with all due respect, I'm not sure whether it matters whether somebody's a woman or white or black or Jewish or Catholic and to get a seat at the table. I reject that. I think getting a seat at the table primarily should be a passion for doing what is right and also the knowledge necessary to make change. So that would be my my feeling, deep feeling, and I feel that. Oh, that's it. I think I've said what I wanted.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, so next in our question queue is Kent and Gordon. You had so Kent, you can unmute, and Gordon, you had an announcement about. Did you?
Yes.
Do you want to do that now?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, so going forward, we want to keep, we love hearing from everybody, but we want to shorten answers to 40 seconds. And this is, you know, it's like a lightning round challenge, I guess. And we also would like to ask that you can put your hand up, that's no problem, but we will call on, we will try to have no repeat candidate answers unless the queue is empty. So just to make sure that we're giving everyone as much as a possibility to, so that we can hear from everyone as much as possible. So if you've already answered, we've already heard from you on the previous question, we're gonna go with people who haven't answered yet. And so please don't feel any type of way about that. We love you. We
You
just
can
want to make
feel
sure that
however you want, but we're
we
trying
hear
to.
as many people as possible. So 40 seconds, and we will let you know when we are closing the queue for answers. We'll try to have about 3 people for each question. We may allow a few more. Please leave that to us.
Okay. I'm gonna ask the folks working behind the scenes to identify a person that that candidates and electors can chat with directly in the chat privately, so that if they have a question about something. So Gordon and everybody, can we figure out who that person would be that anyone on the call can chat to privately if they have a question, so they don't fill up the chat with stuff. So they're not completely silenced. There's a way to communicate, but Katie can also keep track of what's happening in the queue. It shouldn't, it shouldn't be Katie because she's trying to keep track of the queue. So Kent, I think it's your question to ask.
Thanks, Sue. Hopefully you can hear me on this headset. Good evening, everybody here from Australia. It's going on 11 p.m. Thanks so much for being on to all the candidates and electors tonight. And so I would like to just throw out there, how do you as a DNC, how would you as a DNC member argue or advocate for a policy position that could be a specific policy, could be related to taxation or healthcare, could be related to DA, that you, or I suppose more appropriately, we feel strongly about, that may be unpopular with the DNC or other DNC members? And how do you navigate that in your role? Thank you.
Ken, if you don't mind, can you type that question in the chat box as well? Thank you.
Can definitely do.
While candidates are putting their names up, I want to acknowledge some folks.
Are we still hand-upping, or are you calling on us? No.
You're putting in the chat box. Putting in the chat box.
Hand up candidate.
Yeah, and if you've answered a bunch of questions already, we may skip you and go to someone who hasn't answered a lot of questions. So, and our team behind the scenes, which is Bruce Murray, Katie Solon, Kent Getzinger, Kelsey McClendon is there to help us as well. We're trying to keep track so that we can elevate voices that aren't perhaps getting as much time during our session. So we'll do our best job of that. So the folks ready to answer this question? I think we'll go ahead and start with Orlando, though you've done a good job of answering lots of questions. But we'll start with Orlando, then Sarah Law and Joe, and our team will continue to think about how we recognize candidates. So Orlando.
Okay, 40 seconds.
Oh, wait, someone says it's now Martha. Is it Martha or Orlando who's supposed to start?
I can be quick.
Okay, I believe Martha's first in the queue, so we'll go with Martha.
Yeah, so I think it really depends on what the issue is. I mean, we're certainly not there to advocate for easy issues, and we're certainly, we sign on to those that are already out there. But I think there's a couple of ways we can do that, but really depending on the issue. I think there's certainly resolutions that we can bring to the DNC to raise awareness around the issue and hopefully to get that policy issue supported. But I think you really have to look at the kind of issue. So I advocated for immigration equality back in, I was at a DNC meeting in 2007, not a popular issue. Bring it up anyway, find the space, and you will find one or two people who are going to be supportive of that issue, and that's how you follow up on that. And you also have to be really persistent with an issue. You just have to bring it. It may not happen today or tomorrow or next week, but you have to really be persistent, and that's who we are as Democrats abroad. So that's, and you also have to look and see what partners in the United States you can work with, because it may not be an issue that is for the DNC. It might be an issue that you can do better at a state level.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Orlando is next in the queue.
So I agree completely with Martha. The persistence is the key, but also you need to learn how to work within already the structures that are set up within the DNC. Whether you agree with me or not, I took on the DNC on an issue that was important for me, which I thought was important for Democrats abroad, which is the issue of one person, one vote. Now, that was not the main issue that I, based my whole 4 years of the DNC on. But I thought that I could contribute on that particular issue. I took the DNC on, I presented before the Rules and Bylaws Committee, and it didn't happen. Well, live and try to fight another day. But we have to not only advocate for our issues openly and in resolutions and in the platform and all of that, but also try to make these changes within the structure of the DNC, which means amending the charter, amending the bylaws of the DNC. That's where we will see real change.
Thank you very much, Orlando.
Sarah Law, you're next.
So in terms of specific policy issues, I think that in addition to dealing with changing the structure and working inside of the box as well as from the outside, I think some of the specific stuff that I would like to focus on are, of course, the impacts of COVID-19 on a lot of us living abroad, making sure that voting or absentee ballots are a lot easier, specifically in reference to many of us who have voting issues and many of our members who continue to face these issues. I'd like to advocate for increased funding and different grant programs for Democrats abroad and our members. I'd like to work to bridge the gap between our youth Democrats studying abroad and the DNC. Obviously, I would like to focus on the negative effects of FATCA and advocating for economic justice for all, which means fair taxation for all of us. Environmental sustainability and environmental justice is extremely important, and our perspectives living abroad is also extremely valuable. I would like to also work to link voter protection programs within states and link it up with us to help expand voter protection. I'd like to elevate the issues that many of our veterans are facing abroad. And I lastly want to find ways to work with our youth, women, LGBTQ, and Black Caucus and DA members to connect with DNC member counterparts and mobilize on these common issues.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah Law. So next in our queue of candidates to answer is Joe.
Thanks, Sue. I think we make a mistake when we think the DNC delegation or even Democrats abroad has to work exclusively within the structure of the DNC. We can advance the goals of Democrats abroad in various ways. One, of course, is to go to the DNC, but bringing a resolution isn't enough. You have to prepare it well in advance. We often fail by not not preparing the terrain for our resolutions when we take them to the DNC. We can also seek outside allies. We can go to the state parties well in advance and make sure that our views are understood and heard. We can build allies there. That's also important. Or we could do like we're doing with the tax team that I've been working on for DA. We can go straight to the state of Congress and take our issues, our Democrats overseas issues, to the Hill, partly because the DNC doesn't understand them or maybe not care. So we can build in various ways, seek allies where we can find them within the DNC, within the state parties, within the members of Congress, governors, even powerful mayors if necessary, and civil society. We as a team can do that, and we should be doing it often.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Joe. Art wanted to answer this question as well.
Yeah,
Art?
I would second what Joe said about, not everything will be solved in the DNC, that we do have to reach out to the actual people who will actually be making decisions, particularly about issues that are important and unique to Democrats abroad or Americans abroad. And I know it seems I'm obsessed with these webinars, but I spent a lot of time on them recently, so they're in my head. But those who are on the Tim Kaine webinar and the Ted Lieu webinar with the Military and Veterans Caucus people, both know that there were questions raised that they were not familiar with, and they're now on their agenda. They're actually directly reached out to, I think, Martha on one of the issues, Tim Kaine, and this is the way. It's not just sitting in a DNC meeting with 400 people, other people. I would also add one more thing on this. One of the reforms is to make the DNC more transparent by making available the names of the members of the DNC and their contact details. And this is one of the things that we should push for, because it is, in this gradually, increasingly diverse or disparate, distant world, we need to be able to reach out to people like we are doing now today, not just sitting in a meeting, but also communicating regularly online and everywhere else. I'll leave it at that. Sorry, thanks.
Okay,
Thank you, Art.
so we're not sure how many more questions we're going to get to. We think at least the next two, which is Bob Valier and then Connie. So Bob, if you want to unmute and get to your question, and candidates will be doing closing remarks in our last bit of time when we get to that. So just so you know. So Bob, do you want to go ahead with your question?
Yes, please. So this is everybody's last opportunity to see my crazy quarantine solidarity beard, because after this call, I'm shaving it off. So take your blackmail pictures now. So, if you've been to the DNC lately, you would know that it is a pretty diverse group of people. White men of a certain age do not dominate the DNC at this point. And nor do they dominate our current delegation, which is pretty diverse. But I want to ask a question about diversity in a different way, not about identity markers, but about skill sets. And I hope all the candidates will be able to answer this. What is it about you? What skill set do you bring? Knowing that the team of DNC members representing the DPCA is the special alchemy, everybody's a little bit different, and all of these different agents have to work in a almost magical way together to froth in just the right way. So what is it that you bring? What special skill do you bring to the team of the DNC members, however that team may end up looking in the end? What skill set do you bring that is going to be valuable for the DPCA? And conversely, what's your weakness?
Okay, so
Thank you.
can you type that in the
Question.
chat, Bob, so that everyone has the record of that question, if you will? And we have a hand up from Art to answer this question. Thank you.
Well, gosh, it's one of those interview questions where you turn your weakness into a strength, right? Well, I won't say beard. I'm keeping mine, Bob. By the way, I have for 15 years now. But I think there are already some other members who have beards, so that's not unique. Let me throw out this one. I listen. I don't always look like I listen. Sometimes I look like I'm asleep, but I am listening, and I do take input on board. Sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes I might be dismissive immediately, but these ideas, they gnaw away at me. Believe me, they do. And I think about them, and I will get back in touch with people about questions that they've raised. And I think it is important that we do listen to our members and listen to, as people said, a wide variety and the diversity of our membership. In terms of a weakness, I'm a little shy, I suppose. I'm a little bit of an introvert. Those of you who have heard me ask for money may not believe that, but it's true. But it is a weakness, and I need to get over it. And I do get over it when I need to. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Art.
Sarah Law, you're next.
Thank you for that fantastic question. So when I think about some of the things that I think that I can offer in terms of diversity, I spent the last 7 years running a nonprofit in India that works solely on gender equality education and different social issues. We work with a variety of stakeholders, from the government to different organizations to different youth groups all over the world. I think that that experience, being able to work with people to achieve social issues and work to achieve common goals, is something that is going to be valuable when it comes to representing so many of our diverse voices at Democrats Abroad. Because like me, we all have a story. Before we're expatriates, we're all immigrants in a way. And I think that's going to be very valuable when it comes to working with my team and working with all of you to achieve our goals. In terms of weakness, and I think that this is something that we've all felt like, at least I have felt like we've had at some point in our lives, it's visibility. It's trying to get visibility. It's trying to get our voice heard. And I feel like throughout my life, this is something that I've tried to do. It's difficult to do, it absolutely is. And it's sometimes hard, but you keep trying. And I feel like even though that's a weakness of mine, there is also strength in continuing to try. And I promise that I will always try for you.
Thank you, Sarah. So we're going to close the response queue for candidates. Oh, Orlando, what timing? Okay, so Sarah, answer Joe, you're next. And we see you, Orlando.
Okay, thanks, Sue. I think the answer to the question in me, skill sets would be, one, I have a depth of experience that no one in the party can match. I've been in Democrats Abroad for 35 years, and I've held every position except treasurer, which gives me a very in-depth knowledge of how we function. I've also worked with the DNC and the state chairs as well for many years, and so I know that, and I bring that very special skill and knowledge with me. The history of Democrats Abroad, which is very important for going forward. I also bring a team building experience. I built 2 separate law firms in France, each time for starting with 2 lawyers and building up to more than 30. And then the first time I did that, I got hit by a car and had to stop for a while, and then build a whole new law firm. And you can't build a law firm unless you can build teams. That's really important. And that means listening. It also means leadership. It also means seeing around corners sometimes, and being able to foresee the kinds of things that could happen. And then in terms of weaknesses, well, because I'm often very busy, people sometimes say that I'm a bit aloof or inattentive. And if I appear so, I'm sorry for that. But sometimes I just don't have enough time. There are only 36 hours in a day, and I try to squeeze as much time I can do. But that would be my weakness, and I need to work on that. I've made mistakes in the past, particularly in that area, by not listening enough, and I pledge to be, because I'm going into semi-retirement, I can have more time.
Thank
to
you.
be less aloof.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So next in the queue we have, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong queue. I'm sorry, folks, I'm a little bit behind.
Martha. Hi,
Thank
Sue.
you, Katie.
Thanks. So, so what I have brought to the DNC team, and what I bring, and I don't think it's unique, but it's what I do, is I speak up and I get us heard. So, for example, in the Western Caucus, we give 3-minute reports in the caucus. I was able to bring that in such a way, in terms of looking at all of our accomplishments, that it led to a story in the newspaper, right? It got picked up, it got applause, I get us heard. And so that's just around who we are and what we are, but also around policy issues. I think the other thing I would say about that is I'm really up for promoting others. So making sure that that every member of the DNC team is bringing their best and gets out there. My weakness, I would say, is I sometimes get nervous. I sometimes need my butt kicked, which I think Katie did once. Julia did it once when I was in a situation where, you know, we could put our hand up for a leadership role, and I looked around and thought maybe it should be somebody else because I was new on the DNC. But I am a yes, so I do say yes when I get my butt kicked.
Thank you, Martha. Orlando is next.
So I don't want to pick up a fight with Bob Vallier, who would surely win, but I don't think I agree with him that it's not as important to continue to have more representation at the DNC of those traditionally underrepresented groups. And if you look at the DNC delegation that we have right now, we may have a lot of diversity in opinions, but not necessarily in other things. I have many weaknesses. Where to start, I don't know, but I will change the question a little bit. Somebody asked me in one of the Zoom calls, what would I do differently? And I think what I would do differently is I would have a lot more reaching out to people, a lot more conversations, a lot more talks like the ones we're having now. And even though our DNC meetings were open to the public, only a few people knew about that. The DNC calls that we have monthly among the DNC delegation, and I vow to do better if reelected.
Thank you.
So now we're going to go to another question from the floor, and it's Connie Borda. So Connie, you can unmute, and I want to also just check in that that Frederick is able. Frederick, are you able to use the chat function? We haven't heard from Fred. Oh, now I use it.
Well, I haven't
Okay.
been here to this point. My chat function is not functioning, I don't think.
Okay, so Frederick, we'll be sure to check in with you then to make sure that you have a chance to answer some questions. So it was, why don't we let, do you want to speak now? Is there something you'd like to say now, or do you want us to come back to you? I don't want to put you on the spot. Why don't we can do it after the next question?
Fred is on mute.
So.
Fred, hold on, Fred. There we go. I know he's muted again.
Sorry, Frederick. Something happened and we got.
How about
okay.
now?
Okay, now we can hear you. So there's no pressure. You don't have to
Okay.
speak now to the group, but if you would like to, we would welcome you to do that.
Yes, I would like to. Unfortunately, I'm not that versed in the inner workings of our organization. I've been a member for approximately 3 months. So I'm hearing a lot of differences that I'm not familiar with. I'd rather, wait a while and learn what those issues are before I speak on them. However, I would like to say that I don't understand why we don't utilize the Congressional Black Caucus to reach out. I mean, they have a platform that is so expansive. If we could present our proposals to them, if they're valid, legal, and reduce the deficit, they'll fight for us. So that last point is very important as far as congressmen and senators are concerned before they present a bill. But and the others, on my own perspective, proposals are my strength. I've made a living off of federal proposals, I think, for the past 35 years. I'm retired on those proposals. If you're direct, it doesn't matter your ethnicity with the proposal. If you speak the King's English, if you can write, and if you have a point, and it's a deficit reduction point, you'll get an ear. It's always worked for me, and I don't understand what the difficulty is with that. I mean, we talked
Thank you,
about.
Frederick.
Okay.
Thank you, Frederick. So we'll check in with you from time to time. You can also try putting your cursor at the bottom of your screen to see if the little speech bubble shows up that looks like from a comic book or a cartoon. And if you click on that, you'll get a little box open that says that has the chat. That's where everyone is indicating that they want to answer a question.
Okay.
So we're going to mute you because otherwise, well, or unless you can be is it very quiet where you are? Then you can just speak up if you want to answer a question.
Oh,
or you can raise
yes, it's quiet here.
Okay, you can also raise your hand right on the screen, like in real life, raise your hand, and hopefully one of us will see you. So Connie is next to ask a question of the candidates.
Hi, and Sue and Gordon, thank you. This is a fantastic platform. This is a wonderful discussion. Having been on the DNC at 2 different periods, 4 years, I must say I was very surprised at the liberal, I'm bringing this back to progressive politics now and back to the DNC. There's a tremendous amount of very liberal thinkers on the DNC. I know we like to see them all as white male, I don't know, wheelers and dealers, and some of them might be, but there's a wealth of progressivism in the DNC. That's what I would like to ask the candidates. I've met people like Jim Zolby, Larry Cohen, Ken Martin, the chair of the ASDC, Nina Turner. There are some amazing people there for us to exploit our ideas. How would the candidates infiltrate their groups, mobilize, make allies of these groups? How would they work in caucuses in different places? Could we start just that discussion? How do you get your progressive ideas into the DNC? I think it's through progressive people, but what methods and means do our candidates see as getting into that faction of the DNC?
Wonderful question. Thank you. And Sarah Law has her hand up, so we'll ask her.
May I add? It's because of something that Sarah Law said about 7 questions ago that made me realize that forming those teams with other progressives is very, very important. Not only forming our own team, but going into these other teams. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Sarah Law, go ahead. I think it's 40 seconds per answer this time.
Oh, no. Okay. Thanks, Connie. So I want to clarify that comment that I made, that was about my experience growing up in a rural community in the United States and in Minnesota and working on campaigns, working against Republicans effectively to get young minorities elected to office. I absolutely believe that every one of us has a story and everyone has something valuable to offer. In fact, I previously actually worked very closely with Ken Martin, you mentioned him, and we made a team to actually improve election protection in Minnesota as well as in other states. So I know the value of being able to work with different stakeholders, different senators or party membership or party leadership to get things done. I think and I hope that I can use my unique experiences, not just my unique experiences, but also the voices that you all have, and use them to connect with people on our shared experiences, on our similarities rather than our differences. I think that that's what's important, and that's what I hope to do. I hope to use those experiences to come up with new ways to work with people via coming up with different programs where we can get our membership more involved and we can highlight and elevate the issues that we face to a lot of these party leaders that you mentioned, many of our liberal allies. I hope that we can reduce the divisions and not make this about identities, but rather our similarities and about our common ideology. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Art next in the queue of candidates to answer this question, and then we're relying on Frederick to speak up if he wants to answer. So we're starting with Art now.
Okay, thank you. I hope I haven't over whatever talked. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, as you say, there are lots of people. Yasmin Taib from Virginia, I know is a Facebook friend, and I follow what she does, and lots of other people. I think, maybe the solution is, again, the pandemic or whatever the influence of all of this social media and getting together by, you know, Zoom calls than ever will have to take place more frequently maybe than it does. We can't wait to a semi-annual meeting to meet up and link up with people. And, you know, we've all now gotten used to communicating with people. Hopefully more of that happens with the other, you know, as you say, progressive members of the DNC. I think they're all receptive to the ideas that DA brings to the table. You know, I think one of the questions wasn't asked is how would we communicate with members, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, one thing I put out is that we should have regular calls with the members, either as part of the regional calls or whatever. We should be doing the same thing with DNC members, particularly those of a particular bent on a regular monthly basis at least. So we all communicate. And, you know, this, we've all gotten used to the Zoom, and it's maybe a little more interesting than being on a conference call where, you know, someone says, wow, I can't hear you. You know, this is facilitated the process not only in business, but in life and in politics. So I think we need to take that process forward.
Thank you.
Sure, sorry.
Thank you, Art. So Frederick, you're unmuted and we'd love to hear your response.
Hold on, Frederick.
You're not unmuted. The great minds running this session have a few glitches to work out.
How about now?
Now
There
we
we
can
go.
hear you.
Okay.
Yay.
Is there any, I hate to take us off topic, but how much material is available for a person like me who's new on the block to bone up on these issues that are currently seem to be back and forths about internal things? I have no idea what these concerns are. So it sets me at a disadvantage if you cue me up on something like that. However, I'd like to say that I'm enjoying myself here. I think that the party has a lot of promise for me, and I find it as a nice challenge at this time in my life, and I'd like to support all the platforms. However, Medicare for all is a problem for me, but I'll talk about that if there's at an appropriate time.
Thank you.
Okay, now is your time. I mean, you're out of time right now, but now is your time, Frederick, so you can jump in later. I'm thinking about your question. So Orlando, you're next in the queue.
Let me quickly first address what Frederick just said. Frederick, one of the things that we have to do better this time around is to bring other people in to the DNC. Sue, for example, was great in that she has attended some of our meetings at the DNC. I'm proposing that we expand the stipend that we have at Democrats Abroad, not only to help those who can't attend the global meetings, to also attend the DNC meetings. And that would be an opportunity for you, Frederick, and for other people to learn and about the issues and what we're doing, and hopefully be ready to assume the role once we are no longer in those positions. The last thing, I love Connie's word, infiltrate. I think we need to identify those groups that are important, and not only the regional caucuses and the LGBT caucus and the Hispanic caucus and the Black caucus, but there are other groups, other progressive groups. We should identify them and divide them amongst ourselves, the 8 DNC members, and as Connie says, infiltrate them.
Okay, thank you, Orlando.
Thank you.
Peter, you're next, and I don't know if someone's unmuted you or not. Try talking, see what happens.
I'm unmuting myself. Thanks. When I was a student at CCNY and Columbia University, I was the vice president of the Progressive Club there, Reform Club in Manhattan. And we had very special relationships with Congressman Ted Weiss and a lot of other progressive congressmen. So I would reach out to the clubs in the reform for the agenda that I think progressives want. I'd also think it would be very useful to contact and get the support of or cooperation with various NGOs for example, environmental NGOs when you're working on climate change, to get their support and their expertise, which I think is very important too. I think we need to educate a lot of people, even in the Democratic Party, believe it or not, in terms of climate change and what's really happening in climate change, and the urgency of all of this stuff. The urgency of well, we know it, the news today, which I'm sure shocks every one of you people, or maybe it doesn't. But something has to be done. It has to be done quickly, and we need all the support and background that we can to investigate exactly what's going on. So reaching out to these people, I think, will greatly help an issue, and also, of course, and getting the facts right. And making a presentation that really is based on fact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Joe next in the queue to answer this question.
Well, I wouldn't say infiltrate, I would say exfiltrate. As said earlier, we make a mistake if we think that the role of our members as DNC members is exclusively with the DNC. Most of the members of the DNC, whether they're from the state delegations or whether they're members at large, are also active in other Democratic-leaning associations, whether it happens to be unions, environmental associations, women's rights movements, and so forth. And we can actively, nothing requires us to stay within the bounds of the DNC. We can reach out to them as well. As a group or individually coordinating with others, and take that message to them as well, because individually, so that when we do come back as a body into the DNC, the groundwork is laid for our message.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, so in our elector questions queue, we have Bruce, and I think we're probably not going to have time for Jerry's question that just was put in, because we'll want to give the candidates a chance for closing remarks, but we'll see how the next question goes. So Bruce, if you're unmuted and ready to ask your question, we'd love to hear it.
Thanks, Sue. I'm really excited about the opportunity to get all of this information from the candidates. My question has to do with the platform work that's taking place. So many of us are working so hard on the platform now. And after our global convention, it will go to the DNC. And I would like to ask the DNC member candidates what they think the DNC can do, and they also as potential members, to make sure that the platform remains a lively, vibrant text that has power for campaigning into November and then for the next 4 years.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm sorry, can you also type your question in the chat box as well? Excellent.
Wonderful. And while Bruce is doing that, Orlando has put his hand up to respond to the question. Orlando, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Sue. I just have one proposal on that, Bruce, and it's not the full answer, of course. But I think it would be valuable to have, if no other committee within DA, maybe perhaps the elections and candidate credentials committee, to perhaps issue a report at least every 4 years, if not more often, on how, like a report card, on how we are doing at the DNC with our representatives, and when you compare what we're doing with what should be like our Bible, which is our platform. If we had, that report, I would know for sure, and all the other DNC members would also know, that we are being looked at, as we rightly should be looked at, and evaluated for the work we're doing before the DNC. The platform are our standing instructions. That's what we need to try to accomplish. And so I'm suggesting that we be evaluated and a report be issued at least regularly.
Thank you, Orlando. Sarah Law has a response, and Frederick will be after that.
I think Art might be before Sarah Lau. Sorry, Sue. I
Oh,
took a
thank
sing
you.
out. I wasn't going to hit that until he started. So Art next. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Katie.
It is very early in the morning in Arizona, everybody.
I was going to graciously give up my slot. But anyway, thanks. It's a good question. And as I said, you know, winning without meaning is meaningless. So we have to have a platform that distinguishes us as Democrats from Republicans. Fortunately, it's pretty easy to distinguish us from Republicans these days. You know, when we fight for things like universal health care, whether it's Medicare for all or some other media, you know, surprisingly, it actually seems that the Republicans are not for making health care available to everyone at an affordable price, ideally free. You know, and the results, you know, the impact of the pandemic on so many things has made so many of the issues that are important to Democrats more and more important. And we need to get that message out to people. I know this isn't directly addressing your question, but we need a platform for candidates to run on that will appeal to people. And I think we have one by and large, particularly the Democrats Abroad platform on issues that are important to Americans, as well as on issues that are uniquely important to Democrats abroad. So we need to make that more visible, not less visible. And I think we would all be part of making that, part of that process to make our platform more visible and again, attract more voters, which would then make achieving those platform agenda items more doable. If we don't have a majority Senate, you know, much of what we're proposing, you know, is not likely to happen. So it's if it's a chicken and egg or a beneficial cycle, but that's what we need to keep doing and fighting for. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sarah Law, you're next to respond. Thank you.
Sorry, I have issues with my mic. Okay. So I think the most important thing, and a lot of our candidates brought this up, is visibility. But we need to go beyond that, right? We have to find ways to solidify what we're bringing forth to the table. And I think that the best way to do that is to create ways for our Democrats Abroad members and caucuses and subgroups to have pathways to work with their counterparts in the DNC as well as state parties. I think that there's a lot of value in being able to connect, for instance, women's issues and the Women's Caucus or the Progressive Caucus with their counterparts within the DNC. I think by doing that, what we're doing is we're elevating our issues, Democrats abroad, but we're also connecting it with issues that people face back home or back in the United States. And I think that that'll give us a lot more visibility. So I hope to do that by taking our platform and taking that one step further, by coming up with different programs that does create that pathway and work very closely with not just leadership, but also with our different caucuses and different members to create those connections, to get more Democrats Abroad members also organized and a part of this, but also to increase visibility through that front and not just announce what our issues are and then move on. Thank you.
Thank you. So next is Frederick, and before Frederick talks, I just want to say that Frederick, it's your time, and we appreciate that you had some difficulty getting into the queue earlier in the session. And I also want to let all the candidates know that the next thing we're going to do is have Jerry pose his question, and then rather than going through a round of answering his question, we're going to go right into closing remarks. So you'll have an opportunity to address his question in your closing remarks if you want to. So, so Frederick first to respond in his 45 seconds to the last question.
Yes, I understand that Medicare for all has been accepted as a part of the platform for us. But having witnessed the Obama administration spend their whole first year trying to develop a healthcare program for all, I'd hate to see us now again, Biden or whoever else wins, waste the first year trying to reinvent the wheel. The Affordable Care Act is more expansive and reduces the deficit. It needs tuning up and the inclusion of a public option, but it's a perfectly fine. I think there are currently 15 million people using Obamacare. It has some flaws. We can tune it up, retool it, and it would be much more expansive. The biggest problem I have with Medicare for All is on the delivery end, there's so much room for racism, and I've seen it, I've lived it right in the operation rooms and with the nurses, the health officials. It's not what a lot of people think it is. There's separation and bedding. I've been to a particular hospital, Jefferson Hospital in Pennsylvania, where poor blacks were disassociated from, were not even almost in the same building. And that's the delivery end. It sounds great to say Medicare for all, but the Affordable Care Act provided clinics in each county everywhere in the country that included mental health care, rehabs, diabetes, which is the biggest problem in Black communities.
Thank you, Frederick.
Okay,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Frederick. We appreciate everyone respecting our ability to cut people off. So now we're going to prepare to go into closing statements, and I'm going to ask Jerry to ask his question to start.
Okay, I'll be very simple and direct. All I want is a yes or no answer, no explanations or justifications. Do you support the reinstatement of superdelegates on the first ballot? Yes or no?
Okay, so Jerry, if you'll type that question into the chat box, we'd love for you to do that. And we're going to now ask our candidates to go into closing remarks. So we have 7 candidates. So we're asking you to take 60 seconds for your closing remarks. And while you're thinking about how you're going to use your 60 seconds, I want to do some thank yous. So big thank you to my, I guess, co-host or whatever, Gordon, for doing a lot of prep work for today's session. Bruce, who's been organizing our Zoom meeting and helped with the promotion for the event, Kent, who's been managing things behind the scenes, and Katie, who's been our amazing Q master. I want to also thank our candidates for coming to this. I know we wanted to get notice out earlier, so I'm just so pleased that you're all here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being quick with your answers. I want to thank the electors who are attending. I think we had 40 people. I think our high mark was 40. We still have 40. Thank you for your questions. Thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. And I believe we may have some observers here as well. We promoted this to the entire membership of the Progressive Caucus, and we don't know if these kinds of DNC member forums have been open to observers / the public before. I'd be interested to know if this is something new, but proDA is doing this kind of thing partly in response to the question that Frederick asked before about how does a person learn about all this insider stuff. So that's part of what the Progressive Caucus wants to do, is help everybody know more about that. So we're planning to put more party reform articles and things on our website. Someone can put our webpage in the chat so folks can find it. So that's it for our thank yous. If I forgot somebody ping me in the chat or whatever. And now, we don't have an order for closing remarks. So can we do?
Should we go from the top again?
Well, we could. Okay.
Yeah,
we'll go,
I think it'd be quicker if we go from the top.
Okay, we're going to go alphabetical from the top. I think I think he means A. And so that means Art Shankler, you
Okay.
are first. Thank you.
Okay,
And
thanks
just to
again.
note, we're giving everyone
60 seconds.
60 seconds, and that'll take us to about 3 minutes after 10. So we'll be a little bit
Yes.
after 10 finishing.
Okay, I'll try to be a quick 60 seconds. Thanks. Just to get to Jerry's question, we're Democrats. We can't answer anything without explanation. I would be in favor at this moment of adding superdelegates back, but making them vote in conformance with the primary results in their state, at least on the first round. So that would be my position on that. I don't know if that's a yes or a no. It's a sort of. Finally, I want to thank all of you for setting this up. It's been a very interesting discussion. Not only being able to speak to you all, but also to hear what people are saying, whether they're candidates or electors, getting the views of our members and people who are interested in the organization is important to me. I won't say anything too much more about me. I would only say I was on one of these calls the other day and I realized that people who I had known for 10 years in the organization didn't actually know what I do for a living. I won't go into that now. I'll just say, if you want to know more about me, you can write me at art@democratsabroad.org. I'm happy to have an individual call with you, whatever. Please do. It's pretty simple, art@democratsabroad.org. Send me an email, send me a phone number or a Skype or whatever, and I will talk to you directly more about me as you wish. And you can ask me all the questions you wish. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you, Art. Frederick, in our alphabetical order by first name, you are next. So you have 60 seconds for your closing remarks.
Okay. I'd like to thank everyone who set up this wonderful way of communicating. If I'm elected as a global delegate, I tell you, I intend to lean on my strengths, which are proposals, proposals, proposals. I think everything gets done in America based on proposals. The first proposal of mine would be to ensure the EPA has a legal mandate to protect and enforce the laws that protect the natural resources entrusted to all states within the US. And I think if we can get a legal mandate for that, it will go so far towards the global problems. If we can tighten up the laws state by state by state in the US. The second proposal I'd be interested in is ensuring, like I talked about before, ensuring that this new administration doesn't spend the first year in office when we should be doing infrastructure stuff, but spend the first year in office trying to reinvent the wheel with a new medical program that
Thank you. Thank you, Frederick.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Frederick. So next in our, oh man, I'm not prepared. I'm sorry, guys. I think it's Joe. Is that right? It's Joe. Yes. Thank you, Joe. You're next in the alphabetical order. Maybe we need a cue for this.
Who comes after Jay? Thanks. The answer to Jerry's question is no. I do not believe the superdelegates should be reinstated in the first round. I think we're great just where we are. But I want to talk about why I'm here today. Thank you for organizing this. I'm here because I've had a lifelong passion for progressive causes, for labor causes, and I want to continue doing that thing which I have done the best over my life, which is working for the good of the common weal, for the good of the people. And I can do that with vast experience in democratic politics, from stuffing envelopes when I was 15 years old to testifying before Congress 4 times, to working with the DNC and the state chairs. I have a vision of what Democrats can be. I have a vision of what Democrats abroad can be, and I hope you all share that. I'm a team builder. I work together. I can work with everybody. God knows if I've been able to work in a law firm for the last 40 years, I can work with pretty much anybody. And I'm sure that I will be at your service if I get elected to be the DNC slot. So I'm humbly asking for your vote. That's why I'm here, so that you can, if you want to talk more with me, you can do that, or visit my website, www.smallhoover.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. And let me encourage everyone, when put your bona fides in the chat so people can copy, paste, click, and share.
Yes, that's fine. We're going to open up the chat for candidates and electors to put information in. I have the queue in a separate place, so I won't lose it. And Martha, you are next.
Great, thank you. So thanks. This has been a really fantastic and very generative kind of conversation and dialogue. This is exactly the kind of, and thank you, COVID, for bringing us together in this way. It's been incredible in the last couple of months. I'm so glad we're a digital party. But this is the kind of stuff that nurtures us as DNC members to go and advocate for all of you, because when we really talk back and forth and hear about what's really important to everyone and to issues. There were a lot of questions about what we on the DNC will or would do for Democrats abroad, and I just want to expand that and say, it's not about me. It's not about any of the 8 DNC members and what we're going to do. It's not just about that, but it's about everybody. I am not going to go make up my own stuff and take it to the DNC without having the constituency and the community behind me. That's what it's all about. And so getting back to Jerry's question, I did vote, and I completely stand behind the rules that we made to take the superdelegates out of the first round of voting. I think that was the right thing to do. I'm committed to that. What I don't like is being asked a question where I can only give one answer. I think it's really a dialogue that we need to have inside our community, because DNC members need to be able to represent. We need to be able to represent a range of people, and we need to be able to do the right thing at the right time in the context that we're in. So thank you, everybody who was part of this and for organizing. I think it's a great conversation, and I look forward to continuing it.
Thank you, Martha.
Orlando, you're next.
I really think, like everyone else, that this has been fantastic and what has been missing in our campaigns. So thank you really very sincerely. To answer your question, I voted for every reform of the Unity Reform Commission except that one. But I think the ship has sailed. And I am getting on board, even though not from where it sailed, but at a different stop. I think I will not support reinstating the DNC members' votes in a first round. I offer in a video on my website all the reasons why I did this. But the one that I'll offer you now is that I've come now to the conclusion that if you do let the DNC members vote in a second round, we would become even more super delegates than you would want. And so I'm, yes, late, but now I'm getting on board. I'll close with this. I have insisted on holding the powers that be at the DNC to account for promises made to DA, promises that still remain to be kept. And if I'm lucky enough to be reelected, I vow to continue doing that for the next 4 years.
Thank you, Orlando.
Peter, you are next in the queue of candidates to give closing remarks.
Hey, did you turn me on?
Yes, you're on.
All right, thanks. The first thing.
You might want to, Peter, move your computer up a little bit. We're seeing just your chin.
Uh-oh, that's not good. Thank you.
Nice. That's a beautiful frame.
Thank you very much. And let me return a compliment to you, Sue, and Gordon, and the rest of your team, because this is certainly a level playing field. And it warms the cockles of my heart. It really is a democratic and equal opportunity for all of the candidates. So I learned a lot today. And a large, by the way, the answer is no to the superdelegate question. I think a large proportion of Democrats abroad were for Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders. And I want to represent his ideas and his reforms at the DNC. And we need to find ways to get these progressive policies in our platforms, all of them. What I bring to this, to the forum, I think I can help a great deal because of some expertise that I have. I'm an educational specialist. I have a doctorate in education. I've been a principal, a professor, the vice president of an institution. I also have a lot of cross-cultural experience. I speak 6 languages. I know a lot of the countries that are very important foreign policy countries. China, I've worked in China for quite a few years, Russia, and Europe, and South America. I've been the Peace Corps director in China. I was the Peace Corps volunteer in Ecuador and Thailand. I think with this kind of expertise, I can enter arenas with some expertise and some policy implications.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, Sarah Law is the last candidate in the queue to give a closing remark, and then Gordon will finish up. Sarah Law?
Thank you. So, unlike many of our fantastic candidates here today, I don't have the experience of serving on the Global ExCom or serving as a DNC member before. But throughout my experiences working to promote democratic ideals amongst almost my entire life, as both an outsider and an insider, and serving as legal counsel and treasurer of Democrats Abroad India, I have had the pleasure of learning about so many of our Democrats Abroad stories. I am committed to making Democrats Abroad and making sure that our stories matter and are elevated. As your DNC representative, I can't promise that we will always get our desired outcome, but what I can promise you is that I promise to use the experiences that I've had to ensure that our members' voices are heard. I promise to always be committed to you guys, to Democrats Abroad, and the work that we do and the issues that matter to us. I promise to prioritize transparency fundamentally because I'm your representative, and that means that I'm accountable to you. So to answer the question, absolutely not. I do not support reinstating superdelegates in the first round of voting because that is not what reflects Democrats Abroad and Democrats Abroad's voices. I promise to use every avenue possible to represent you at every single meeting and elevate our party. Regardless of whether or not I am chosen to be your DNC representative, I promise to use my voice to diligently work to ensure that all of your voices are heard and that I'm able to communicate with you time and time and again to be accountable to you all. Because that's what's important right now. That's what we need. Regardless of who is elected, we need transparency, accountability, and we need someone who is willing to bring our issues to the forefront. It would mean the absolute world to me to be able to earn your vote. But regardless of that, I would love to continue talking to you and keep the dialogue going. Please feel free to email me. I put my email out on the group chat. I'll do it again in case it didn't go through. But thank you so much. And thank you so much, guys, for organizing this fantastic dialogue. This is amazing.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hey, Gordon, you want to finish us up?
Yes. So first and foremost, I want to ask if there are any other candidates on the line that we may have missed. All right. Silence means no. Okay. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us in today's session. This came out even better than we could have, hoped for. We really are looking to amplify the voices of Democrats Abroad members, especially those members of the Progressive Caucus. I want to close with the beginning of our mission statement for Progressive Caucus, and that's that we are an affinity group for members of Democrats Abroad who embrace policies that will advance the U.S. towards a society rooted in economic fairness, social, racial, and environmental justice, particularly for the most vulnerable people in our society. We are seeking increased transparency, fairness, and accountability in political processes, and we support international cooperation, peace, and mutual respect. And so the reason we brought you all here today is because we want all of our members to have the opportunity to understand how you're going to represent Democrats abroad to the DNC, and how you're going to represent the DNC to us. And so it kind of an unplanned, but question that I wanted to ask that I couldn't ask, I like to give as a homework assignment. That question, and we'll share this answer with our members. That is, no one likes learning about key votes or issues after representatives have made up their minds. How will you make your votes and positions as transparent as possible to Democrats abroad voters and solicit their opinions before you make key votes? So that's my homework assignment for all of you. I'm going to drop it in the chat. Please copy and paste it somewhere on your computers and go ahead and send your answers to us. We really appreciate you taking the time today to make your voices heard, and taking the time to actually answer questions from the electors who will be, responsible for, who will be choosing, who is going to represent us at the DNC. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks,
we really
everyone.
appreciate you for taking the time.
I think we'll just keep the meeting going if people wanted to chat informally, but I guess we'll stop the recording. So thanks, everybody.